Retro.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continuously unexpected. So uncivilized.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And I am looking at I just didn't change that line. Okay. All right. Well, this episode features the next installment in our Revenge of the Sith series. So before we get to our guest and dive into that, Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are?
Absolutely. We are very conveniently and easily found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The dish is aligned. The signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So this will be part 9 of the Revenge of the Sith series. If you're new to the podcast and you're not sure what this series is, what we do each year is we take a movie that's celebrating an anniversary ending with a 5 or a 0, and we divide the movie up into 12 segments. That usually comes out to about 10 to 15 minutes per segment, and we talk about that one per month over the course of the year. Gives us an opportunity to do a real deep dive into the movie. And so, of course, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith this year, so that's the movie we've been focusing on, and we've been having a great time with this because Revenge of the Sith is perhaps the best of the prequels. It's widely regarded as such. It doesn't have to be your favorite, but anyway, it's been a fun conversation. We're getting into a very deep portion of the movie with this segment, and so it's not going to be quite so lighthearted this time around,
and that's okay. That's one of the things about this particular movie in general is that it really is heavy in a lot of ways, but it's necessarily so.
Yep. Well, we've got a great guest standing by. He's a returning guest. You've all heard him here before, so let's go ahead and dive on into it. He's back. We're glad to have Ross Hollebon with us once again. You know him from the Cockpit podcast, his work with Fantha tracks, and numerous guest appearances on all the podcasts you listen to everywhere else. So, Ross, welcome back to Podcast Stardust.
Jay, Dennis, thank you so much. It is always fantastic catching up and finding out what's going on in our Star Wars galaxy, but also just in our real world here and there. So it's been wonderful hearing some stories from y'all.
Yeah.
It's always great having you.
It was great catching up with you before we started recording here and hearing a bit about your experiences in Japan. That was for Celebration. That was a lot of fun. So, as we always do, we're gonna warm up with some questions about this movie that we ask all of our guests. Jay, go ahead and take it away.
All right, Ross. So here's your first one. So, what was your first experience seeing Revenge of the Sith? What do you remember about that specific experience itself? Who were you with? What was going on at the time for you, and what can you share with us about that experience?
Really, my best friend since 3rd grade. He and I, we would go on toy hunts. We would go on whatever, and this is shortly out of college, and just waiting in line. Like we're in line for the midnight show with 3 hours before other people are showing up. Like there's like the group of 50 people that are there before everyone else. And it was just like, hey, here we go. This is happening. And it was that culmination because, when the first prequel came out, like that, the hype was so big. And I remember how excited we were there and kind of hitting that journey. It's almost like the Lord of the Rings trilogy or some others when it's just like, hey, this is the end of the story. Like we're going to be different when we walk out of the theater tonight. And it's going to be so fun to talk about all of it. and it did not disappoint in that regard.
Mhm.
Indeed. Indeed. So, what is your favorite scene from Revenge of the Sith?
I mean, I think we talk about it tonight, so I'll wait until we get there.
Okay.
Um, but uh, it is chilling, and not that there aren't multiple chilling moments in these 10 minutes that we're discussing, but it is uh, it makes you look around with everything going on in the world today. I think
Okay.
it's a safe way to put it.
Very good.
We were foreshadowing. We just knew, that you were
Yeah.
the one. So, who is your favorite character in Revenge of the Sith and why?
Um, I think it's Obi-Wan. Uh, just uh, not that Padme doesn't obviously go through tons, but uh, just seeing his hurt, seeing his disbelief, um, and what he has to challenge himself with, looking out for the greater good, even though it's someone that he cares about deeply and knows that it's hurting Padme as well. And really having to overcome, and first time he's kind of going head to head with Yoda on something and saying, I can't do this. And Yoda's like, you can't handle Palpatine. You need to go face him. Um, so it's that growing up moment that makes who old Ben Kenobi becomes. It makes so much more sense, at least to me.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, Obi-Wan it's hard not to go with him when it comes to this movie. Between him and Anakin, I think that's who most people have selected when we've asked that question so far this year. All right, well, let's dive into this segment. We are starting where we left off last time at 1 hour, 33 minutes, and 38 seconds, and we'll be going to about 1 hour, 43 minutes, and 43 seconds. I'm getting really good at nailing about these 10-minute portions of it here, which is hard to do because in this case, we kind of cut off in the middle of the scene, but I'm trying to preserve some 10-minute segments for the rest of the year. Otherwise, we could just go on for 15, 20 minutes talking about stuff with this one. But this all picks up at the Jedi Temple, and Obi-Wan and Yoda are making their assault on the clone troopers there that are outside. And they're really going at it here. This is beyond the Padawan that Bill Organa saw get cut down by the clone troopers here. This is really like the first opportunity we've seen the Jedi get a chance to fight back and really take it back to the clones. And Yoda's really showing off with the way he's handling here. We don't get as much of an action shot of Obi-Wan there, but what's your takeaway from this opening shot of this segment? Go ahead, Ross.
It's desperation. It is. There's unknown. There's how do we go home? And oh no, there is no home right now. Everything is happening here as well. And I'm sure in their head it isn't even how do we get home for ourselves. It's how do we get home for the younglings. And we know what's coming up there. It is. I can't fathom what's going through their head as the world has just turned upside down after Order 66 has been in effect. And they're having to fight their comrades who they've been on the battlefields with all over the galaxy for years in the war. So they don't get any processing time. It is fight and flight all at once.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Jay?
Well, I would echo a lot of the things that you just said, Ross. And, for me too, I think of this makes a good argument, I guess you could say, that attachment is bad because, as you said, they were, alongside these clones for so long. And then all of a sudden, as you said, reality just gets ripped out from underneath them. And now they have to quickly adapt. And it's everything's getting turned on its head for sure. Yeah. And just the fact that they're all able, or that Obi-Wan and Yoda are able to fight all of those clones and just the technique that they're able to employ and carry through with that. I mean, it's just sheer force of will, pardon the pun. But yeah, Dennis?
Oh yeah, well the surprise of Order 66 has worn off. Unlike all the Jedi that were suddenly caught off guard when, think of Ki-Adi-Mundi leading his clones into battle, and he realizes they're not charging up behind him. He turns around and they're all targeting him, and it's all he can do to fend off all those shots at once. You've got the Grand Master of the Jedi Order in Yoda, and one of the most adept masters in Obi-Wan here, taking it to the clones. And the thing is like there's like no satisfaction in what they're doing. When that scene is concluding, Yoda does that move where he kind of spins his saber and pulls it up, and he just has got that really grim expression on his face that this is a necessity, and it's not anything that they're taking joy in. That the Jedi are on the verge of going extinct and they got work to do. So that was my big takeaway from that. So we go from there to the Senate building, and we're going to go a lot of back and forth between different locales here in this 10 minutes. But this is the first time we get into the Senate as the Chancellor is addressing the assembled senators, and Bail joins Padmé on her platform, and she tells him that the Chancellor is describing the Jedi plot to take down the Republic. And, on cue, Palpatine says the remaining Jedi will be hunted down and defeated here. So we're going to come back to the Senate a couple times, like I said, as Palpatine is making more and more declarations about things going on here. But Padmé looks exasperated here, and of course, Bail just saw the Jedi getting cut down at the temple. But what observations do you have of this scene, Ross?
So is much desperation as was shown in the scene that we just talked about. Here it's resignation and disbelief of this can't be happening right here. You can't believe that Padmé and Bail can't believe that everyone in that room's believing what they're being told. And the greatest trick that's ever been pulled. Mm-hmm. And it is, basically putting everyone in the galaxy in handcuffs, and they just don't realize it yet.
Mm-hmm. And Jay, one of the things that occurs to me now that we're talking about this is that Anakin's already shown up at Padmé's apartment and basically given some version of this story to her, and she was in shock there, and now she's hearing it from the Chancellor. So, building off what Ross said, what do you think? I mean, is this, is she, where, can you put yourself in her head? What is she thinking? What's she going through here?
Well, Padmé's always been a realist when it comes to her role in the grand scheme of things in some ways. I mean, obviously she has given into her feelings, and that's why she's married to Anakin, and she did cross that line, but she's also been able to remain true to herself in the fact that her overall values are just of peace and diplomacy and just overall justice for all people. And so obviously she also, and Bail, they both have a very vested interest personally in the Jedi because they are so close to so many Jedi. I mean, you think about they of all people probably have the most experience personally with Jedi out of any senator. I mean, I shouldn't say all the senators, but a lot of the senators, as we were shown in the Clone Wars, there's been various levels of relationship with their understanding of who the Jedi are. So, I think for Padmé, she and Bail both have that obviously underlying, understanding of who they are. And so I think for Padmé, it just becomes a crisis of values where, she has on one hand her duties to uphold, and then on the other hand she has her marriage to uphold, and the fact that she loves Anakin. So I mean, she's really being torn at this point, I think. And as much as she's trying to hold it together, and she has pregnancy hormones, which that's a big thing too. So you put all that into the cocktail in the mix, and it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And at least they're not force sensitive inside of her belly.
Right.
Who
We
even
don't
knows what
we
level
don't
that
think.
goes
Yeah,
to?
exactly. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, pulling back from Padme and focusing on Bail Organa, I mean, it's a very small role that he has, in this scene, which is basically to show up and ask Padme so she can tell the audience what is going on here. But as we've done so many times, Jay, I'm thinking of, Mask of Fear, Reign of Empire Mask of Fear here, and Bail's crusade to get the truth out about the Jedi. And of course, he just witnessed all this. He just witnessed that when he got up to the temple and wanted to know what was going on, and the clones told him to leave. Then all of a sudden, the Padawan is getting cut down in front of him, and now he has to, sit here and take it as the Chancellor outlines this plot that he clearly doesn't believe. Of course, he doesn't know about Padme and Anakin at this point, but he's going to find out soon enough. So that just kind of colored my viewing this time around. So moving on, back at the Jedi Temple, Obi-Wan and Yoda are now inside, and it's interesting. Of course, as the audience, we already know that Anakin's responsible for everything that just happened here. He brought the 501st with him and wiped out the Jedi inside the temple. But Obi-Wan and Yoda don't know. Yoda, as we'll find out, and the next time we see him, clearly suspects, but they're starting to look at the clues. And Obi-Wan notices that hey, the younglings have been killed. Not even the younglings survived. And then Yoda points out that this Padawan was killed with a lightsaber. So with that in mind, what do you think? I mean, I feel like Yoda already knew that he had a strong suspicion that Anakin was involved in this. Is he trying to prep Obi-Wan for this reveal, or what do you or do you think I'm wrong? He doesn't know yet in this situation. But Ross, what's your opinion?
I think you've nailed it. I think he's very aware and suspects it, but I think that goes back to his initial feelings about Anakin of something's off here. And maybe we shouldn't train him and everything else. So I think that kind of all ties in. The part that I love about this is when Yoda says that, but then Obi-Wan answers with who could have done this? And then it's one of the best cuts, I think, in maybe film history, going to Anakin slicing through the Separatist leaders, like on cue. So just that stood out to me. I'm sure it stands out to me every time, but focused on this short period of the film and really diving into each moment, I was just like, oh, that was brilliant right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Jay, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Yoda definitely suspected that it was Anakin, just given everything that they've seen all along, the fact that he was so close to the Chancellor. And, at this point, they were told that Palpatine was the Sith, but for them to be able to embrace that idea, and also the fact that Anakin went to Yoda several times and sought out his counsel on these dark feelings that he was having, and these visions, and all of these different types of things. So yeah, so I think Yoda did definitely have a feeling, at least.
Yeah. And I also love, you pointed out the cut to Anakin as he's slaughtering the Separatists here. It's like this moment of chaos, and I think what's great about that is it's not just an answer to that question of who. It's also kind of at a Anakin in crisis in a way type of a mode. Here he is. He's not serene. He's not calm. He's in the throes of all of this. You're used to the word desperation, Ross, when we first started talking about this segment. I think applies to Anakin here. He's done everything out of desperation to find a way to save Padme. And not that the Separatists and their guards are any challenge for him on Mustafar, but it's almost like he's desperate to get through it to get on to the next thing. Because at this stage in his life, I don't think this is anything he's relishing. So
Yeah, he's going through it. He is trying to break out of that cocoon right now, and he doesn't actually know what he's become. And I think we get that in a moment a little bit later as well, where he is a tortured soul who I think realizes, well, I chose this path. I can't change it now.
So back at the Senate building, Palpatine continues with his address, and he's talking about how the attempt on his life has left him scarred and deformed, but his resolve has never been stronger. So he's really selling the lie here to the galaxy. Jay, you and I have watched a bunch of episodes of the Clone Wars lately, Lightsaber Lost, and then the Zillo Beast Strikes Back, where there's that gigantic image of Palpatine on the screen hanging there from space, where he's professing about there is no plot by the Jedi. And, we kind of remarked at the time that this was he's planting that seed by denying it exists. It's like, well, who said this? It's just kind of like, I've heard reports. Oh yeah, reports of what? Oh, that the Jedi have a plot. Really? From who? Not important. They're not true. There is no plot. And, and here it is. It all comes to fruition, and it makes him out. Again, that didn't exist when this movie came out, but it's hard as involved as Star Wars fans as we are not to take these things into consideration on our rewatches here. But Jay, I'll go to you first on this. What did you think about this presentation of Palpatine, and were you thinking of any of these other things when you saw it this time around?
Well, when I saw it this time, it's just basically him playing the pity card, in terms of like, look what I've been through, but I am so strong, and this is something that we're going to do together, and it's just this whole show of unity and solidarity, and the first Galactic Empire for peace and prosperity, and this is going to be a good thing for everyone. And I've often referenced this later on, when Jin talks about this to Saw Gerrera, and he asks her, can you stand to see the Empire's flag wave? And she said, it's not a problem if you don't look up. People just want safety and security. And so whatever, Palpatine says at this point in time to make people believe that, and that he is this visage of strength for them in light of everything else that's quote unquote going on around him, that, that's what people are holding on to.
Yeah. I mean, Ross is just he's got everyone there in the Senate is just, rapt attention to what he's talking about. And of course he's able to show off his scars to everybody there. And then, we go back to Anakin, and another cut back to Anakin killing more Separatists here. But what do you think of that scene?
It is. So when you ask my favorite scene, this is it. Growing up outside of Washington, D.C., paying attention to politics constantly, reading about things in other countries and how takeovers occur and things like that. It is so powerful because this directly leads in, and I hope I'm not stealing anything from you here, but Palpatine's next steps are, in order to ensure the security and continuing stability, the Republic will be reorganized into the first Galactic Empire for a safe and secure society. And that's when we get Padmé's response, as everyone is cheering and excited in the room. So this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. These two sentences are why we get Star Wars, are why we get Andor in those two incredible seasons. This is that actual birth point of so much of what we love about this story. So that's why it's so important to me, and that's why it is my favorite piece here, because it is the first domino. We've finished other sets of dominoes. This is the first big domino that falls over, at least in my mind.
Yeah. And we'll get back to that line in just a minute. But going back to when we get that, in between those two scenes in the Senate we were just talking about here, we get that shot of Anakin, and he takes down a few more members of the Separatist Council. But then he's going into that conference room, and you see, I think it's Wat Tambor maybe at the end of that table, just kind of perched behind one of the chairs, and there's other people hiding in that room. but Anakin does that look over his shoulder, and it's kind of like, we just talked about how he was all full of chaos and fury and desperation, and that last cut that we had to him, but now it's just kind of it's there's almost like a bit of guilt there when he does that. He looks over it. It's like, I'm going into this room to slaughter. There's no one can stop me. Who is seeing me in this moment? There. But I don't know. I mean, in the one hand, it's like, we see him remorseful here in this very segment in a bit as he's, but here it's just like, he's not. It's just like, I've got to get this done. I got to get through this here. And he is, he's a tornado ripping right through this control room on Mustafar, and nothing is going to stop him, get in his way. And again, at this point, it's not about punishing the galaxy like he does when he's Darth Vader. This is all about the means to an end, which is to, secure Palpatine's favor, to prove himself a worthy apprentice so that he can get the knowledge he needs to make sure that she's going to be okay on that. I read an awful lot into like 5 seconds of film time here, but any other comments on that, Jay, before we move on?
Well, for me, I think Anakin, he yells out in a way that's almost wounded as he's going after the Separatists. It's a battle cry, but yet it's also, as you put it earlier, Ross, it's a desperation cry. But I can't help to think that he might have, I don't want to say took pleasure in, but he, thinking about some of the Neimoidians that had threatened Padmé's life at one time, the fact that he was able to sock it to him in this moment. And I'm actually really glad that in the novelization, there was some dialogue between Anakin and some of the Separatists. Like, for example, when I think it's Rune Heiko, when he says, Lord Sidious promised us peace. Well, in the novel, he said, no, that was a misread transmission. He said, leave you in pieces. So I'm glad that they took that out, because I think it was more powerful to not say anything in that moment and literally let the actions speak louder than words. But, there was little things like that, even though it was in the novel and it was fun to read. I don't know if fun's the right word, but you know what I'm saying. But at any rate, so I think Anakin was still pretty tormented at this point, but he also was, as you said, Dennis, kind of working on autopilot in a way too.
But, and I think, Dennis, that kind of, in building off what you said there, Jay, it's kind of, he's physically still human, but the machinations of him becoming a machine are already in place, even though he is all human still. So that transition is starting before he's got one piece of metal put into him. So I think that's another way. And that's something that George Lucas does so well in his storytelling, is kind of leading into those pieces.
Yeah. And I'd forgotten about that line from the novelization because I haven't read it recently, but I agree with you, Jay. I'm glad they left it out of the movie, because yeah, it's a macho type of 80s action type of a line, type of a thing to say. And if that's what they were going for, I think it works. But I agree with you, Jay, because I thought it was Newt Gunray that said that. And, it's like, he only promised us peace. We only wanted, and he doesn't let him finish that. It's like, I am done listening to you. You brought pain to Naboo. You created this war. You made it impossible for me to, be the one. You nearly assassinated Padmé on Geonosis, time and time and time again. And it's just it's an exclamation point on everything, which doesn't, I don't want to hear it anymore from you. And if he'd stopped to take that breath and said, no, leave them in pieces, we'd be complaining about the corniness of that, I think, right now.
And we'd all be saying it in
I'll be back.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're all going to say it like Schwarzenegger.
There you
Awesome,
go. Perfect.
Awesome.
We're on the same force wavelength there. Perfect.
And I just want to take a moment, because as great as this 10 minutes is, it's unfortunate how much it jumps back and forth. It's impossible to talk about something in the moment without looking ahead 3 cuts. But that line, Padmé, so this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. That is just one of the best lines in all of Star Wars. I mean, it's very, very profound. Natalie Portman did such a fantastic job delivering it. And to me, it's Anakin hasn't told her the whole truth. She doesn't know about Sidious being a Sith. She doesn't know about Anakin being a Sith in this situation. She's been told by her husband that the Jedi were in rebellion against the Republic and all of this. And, she says at the time that she can't believe it. What about Obi-Wan? And then, Anakin says, oh, I don't know. We can only hope that he's remained loyal to the Chancellor. And then what are you going to do? I'm going to remain loyal to, the Chancellor, the Senate, and you. And so as far as she knows, this is the Chancellor and Anakin fighting back. I think she has her doubts against the Jedi. She doesn't know that they fall into the dark side here. But this is such a poignant observation here, which is that there's something bigger afoot going on here beyond what Anakin has told her, beyond what the Chancellor is saying. It's that they've let this war erode their liberties here. The Chancellor's extended his power, and now the war's over, and he's doing it for good. And he's doing away with elections. He's, the Senate's going to be around, but they don't get to pick who leads them anymore. That's been taken away. And so, she's directly addressing that in this moment. And so anyway, it's just very, very, very profound. And it was one of the finest things to put in this movie.
Agreed.
So back at the Jedi Temple, this is where Obi-Wan's whole world comes crashing down around him beyond what it already has. And he is changing the message that the clones have set up, encouraging them to come, the Jedi to come back to the temple. And in this case, telling them to stay away. I just read A New Dawn a month ago. And, when Kanan, then known as Caleb Doom, gave him that idea that it could be used to warn people away. So that was kind of fun to revisit. But as they go to leave, Obi-Wan just has to know. And so he's going to go check the security recordings. And Yoda cautions him against it, which is like, you're only going to find pain there. And then Obi-Wan says that he must know the truth. All right, stop right there for a second. What if Obi-Wan had not looked? just indulge. I don't know the answer to this, but what if Obi-Wan had not? What was Yoda's plan from there? Because, they immediately, once they know, there's no doubt about it. They're going to take out the Emperor and they're going to take out Darth Vader. Of course, they don't know that's his name at the moment, but it's like that. But this kind of gets back to what I was saying earlier, with Yoda just noticing that, hey, this is a lightsaber that killed this Padawan. And so he's just kind of starting to maybe brace Obi-Wan here. And also, because I don't think he honestly is telling Obi-Wan, don't look in there. It's that, you're going to look and you're going to find something terrible. But what do you think, Ross?
Yeah, I think it is. I think he knows, and he knows what it's going to do to Obi-Wan to see this. If Obi-Wan doesn't see it and everything's delayed, does Padmé's heart break the same way? Did the twins go, are they aware of the twins at that point instead? Does the Emperor? So like all these things had to happen for it to play out. So if Obi-Wan doesn't look and is just delayed, I mean, if he's delayed an hour, maybe he doesn't get on Padmé's ship. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of what ifs. I'm very comfortable.
Maybe she doesn't go at all.
How it did play out. And, with Yoda's line, it's, if into the security recordings you go, only pain will you find. And it's not necessarily saying don't do it, but it's just like, this isn't going to go well. So I think again, it was well written, and it it's that next domino that falls. Like we're in a vicious set of these things just dropping left and right.
Jay, what do you think Obi-Wan's response would have been if he didn't see it for himself on that recording? If Yoda just told him that your, Anakin, your former apprentice, the boy you raised, has fallen to the dark side, Sith Lord, he now is.
Yeah,
That was a
I mean,
poor Yoda
this is
impression.
this is a huge what if,
Mhm.
because you both brought up some really great points. That delay of even an hour, Obi-Wan wouldn't have gone to Padme's apartment. Padme wouldn't have gone to Mustafar. Obi-Wan wouldn't have gotten on her ship, those types of things. And, as we alluded to earlier, I think that Obi-Wan or that Yoda had a feeling that it was probably Anakin, but I don't think obviously he didn't know for sure. He just knew that no matter what Obi-Wan saw, it would be painful, because they just talked about the fact that all of those injuries were done by a lightsaber. So no matter who you see in those security recordings, it's going to be painful, because it had to be someone that they knew.
Mhm.
And so I think, it, I think Obi-Wan did need to see it, because for Yoda to just say, "Oh yeah, this was Anakin." I mean, it's one thing to hear something about it happening, but it's quite another to see it for yourself. It has a different impact.
I like that. And it now begs another question, which is, yeah, I think you're right, Jay. It doesn't matter who it was. It would have been a Jedi, someone that they trusted. It had to have been someone important. It couldn't have just been any Jedi in this
Mhm.
case. It had to be someone important. It had to be someone that had some power behind them. So did Yoda? I think kind of gets into the idea of attachments maybe here. Is Yoda cautioning Anakin? Is Yoda cautioning Obi-Wan here that you're going to see something that you don't like and you may not be able to take it in this case, which you would think a Jedi Master would be able to do in this situation for all of their preparation to avoid attachments and to handle those things. I think is it that Yoda knows after all of his centuries of training Jedi that this is not a thing anyone can actually perfect, that there are frailties here, and this is going to hit him like a ton of bricks.
Mhm.
Either of you got a thought on that?
I mean, they're lost.
Mhm.
And he has been admitting that his vision has been clouded. There's something that he can't quite understand, and he's figured it out now. And it is, I think, just blown away. Like if you know the smartest, most powerful person in the room, and then all of a sudden they realize that they're dealing with a lot internally more than externally, but he's trying to do both at the same time, and also knowing how crushing it's going to be to someone who has looked up to him for guidance. So, I mean, at that point, Yoda, if I'm Yoda, I feel like I have failed at everything I've ever done. And that's what Palpatine wants him to feel like going into this. So, it is gut wrenching.
Mhm. Mhm. Any other thoughts, Jay?
Well, I think that that's why Yoda wants to go after Palpatine himself, because even though, he tells Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan begs him, he says, "Please let me go after Palpatine. I can't go after Anakin. I can't do it." He understands that it has to be, at this point, he understands it has to be done. I know I'm skipping ahead just a little bit here. He
Mhm.
understands, he knows it has to be done. He just doesn't want to have to be the one to do it. And I think for Yoda, as you pointed out, he feels like he's failed everything. So to defeat Palpatine is his last ditch effort. And again, as we know, eventually, he says, "Failed, I have. Go into exile, I must." So it's for him, this is his purpose, his last fight, essentially. And so he's got to do that, and he's got to send Obi-Wan to Anakin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. 'Cause, yeah. I mean, finishing off the scene as you were alluding to here, uh, they see the recording, and we've got Palpatine telling Anakin that he's done well, go and bring peace to the Empire. Of course, doesn't say where to go. He just says, go and bring peace to the Empire. Anakin already knows that, where he's supposed to go. And then Yoda is like moving on with business, which is, I tried to save you from this. Perhaps, perhaps it was Yoda's plan. It's like, we don't have to take care of them right this second. But now that now that you've seen this, Yoda's response to this: destroy the Sith. We must. We got to get on with it. And perhaps that is what they need to do while those two are separated. because I suspect, we saw how much of a challenge it was for Luke fighting Darth Vader when he's got the Emperor calculating in his ear in Return of the Jedi the entire time, casting doubt, sowing doubt in his mind, tempting him with the dark side of the Force. You get those two together, and call it the tag team match of the century if you want. But the taking on the two Sith at once is a really, really tall order here. But yeah, I mean, Obi-Wan's pleased. Like, he's like my brother. I cannot do it. But I feel like between now and the end of this movie, Obi-Wan completely comes around on it. Like, it's his duty to do this, which is, if there's any salvaging the situation, no matter how small, it's Obi-Wan that's going to do it. In this case, it can't be Yoda. It can't be anybody. All the other Jedi are dead as far as I know, but no other Jedi was going to get through to Anakin. If there's any chance of that, it's got to be Obi-Wan on this. But Yoda cautions him. Anakin is twisted by the dark side. The boy you knew, gone he is, consumed by Darth Vader. I hadn't considered this until today when I was doing the prep for this, that, Obi-Wan tells Luke in A New Hope, Darth Vader betrayed and murdered your father. And then he tells him in The Empire Strikes Back that, twisted and evil Vader is, the good man that is your father is gone and stuff like that. He's taken this to heart. They truly believe that Anakin there is no Anakin at this part. Obi-Wan will attempt to call him that over a number of times, but that he can't get through by calling him that anymore.
And I think, Dennis, digging into that with the boy you trained, gone he is, consumed by Darth Vader, that's Yoda dealing in an absolute.
Mm-hmm.
True.
That's not his style. That is what they are all warned against. That is an absolute. So I feel like that's where Yoda lost his way. And again, Jay, you brought it up so well, talking about when he gets at the end and is talking about, I failed, I need to go into exile. I think that's where Obi-Wan's natural leadership was like, it's my turn to do this. And he was told that, and I believe that's the last time we see them talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then Obi-Wan has to become the guy at that point.
Yeah, last time they talked to each other, Anakin and Obi-Wan, is that what you're saying? Or Anakin and or Obi-Wan and Yoda. Yeah, not until they get back to the after Anakin's been cast into the lava, right? But right, yeah. And I think that's the big difference between Luke and Yoda and Obi-Wan on this case, is that Luke does realize there's such a thing as redemption. And it's something that I think the Jedi believe in to a point. At some point, they give up on that idea, but Luke chose love at the end. But that's a conversation for whenever we get around to revisiting Return of the Jedi again. So the other thing that stands out to me in this scene is that, Obi-Wan, in one last desperate attempt to get out of having to confront Anakin, says he doesn't even know where to look. And then Yoda says, use your feelings, Obi-Wan, and you will find him. So Yoda is in. I mean, you could almost see the twinkle in Yoda's eye when he said that. Like, who to go ask on this one. Am I reading too much into that expression? But or what do you two think?
Hey, what do you think?
Oh, I think that Yoda has very much long since suspected Padme and Anakin, because you think about it, even back in Attack of the Clones, when they first show up and Padme runs over to Anakin after, they have the fight with Dooku. Yoda's right there. Obi-Wan's, they're right there. They see Padme running over to Anakin, and it's just, and obviously there's, Yoda can read the room. Let's just put it that way. So.
And then Yoda was like, oh, he absolutely did the floating pair thing.
Yeah.
But it kind of begs the question is, why didn't Yoda ever do anything about this if he knew? Or, it could be something he's only realized for certainty recently, but if he knew this, why didn't he do anything about it?
That's a great question.
There's no on-screen answer. We can only speculate on this, but
part of me goes back to the High Republic when, certain kinds of attachments were kind of not paid attention to. And then, of course, you have like Ki-Adi Mundi, who had like how many? He was married. But they always said that that was, for purposes of his species, but whatever.
Right. Right.
Well, and it's what relationship did Yoda have? He had these responsibilities in his role not to accept everything that Sifo Dyas saw.
Mm-hmm.
And then him as the savior comes out from Qui-Gon. So is Yoda questioning? He's like, I have to let this play out. I can't stop every single thing that's happening. You just have to let the future unfold. So does he think, and we know that eventually it plays out like it was foretold, but in a way that none of them would have wanted it to happen, and everything they had to go through to get to it. So I don't know, that may be looking too much into it, but I think Yoda is that more pacifist and let this kind of play out type thing.
And I often wonder too if it's also because the fact that he knows what an asset Anakin had always been, up into this point, and the events of Revenge of the Sith, obviously. So it's kind of like, well, what's the lesser of the two evils? So I'll just let Anakin be Anakin because he's doing so much more good over here that, we'll not worry about that.
Okay. Here's my response to that. If there is an award for most likely to have an ulcer, it goes to Yoda in this movie. And here's why. Go back to the Phantom Menace at the end of the movie. Confer upon you the title of Jedi Knight, the Council does. Agree with your decision to train the boy. I do not. And then Obi-Wan says, I will train him. I promised Qui-Gon. And he goes, since Qui-Gon's defiance in you, I need that. You do not. And he didn't agree with the decision to train Anakin at the beginning. How many times in this movie does he do that whole, he rubs his head? You can just see the migraine setting in for Yoda. And he's on the gunship when Mace Windu is expressing his doubts about putting Anakin with Palpatine at this point. And then Obi-Wan brings up the prophecy. Is he not the chosen one? And then Yoda says, prophecy that may have been misread in this situation. So he has had his doubts. But I think even as the Grand Master of the Order, he's been outvoted this entire time. They've been in a time of war. And do you perhaps call out your most powerful Jedi because you don't like some of his on-the-side behavior? Is it just too hard to believe that this guy, who is not single-handedly helping you win the war, but is such a big factor in you winning this war, could be your ruination in this case? And even at the end, Yoda wasn't there when Anakin came back and told Mace Windu, I've learned a disturbing truth. Palpatine's is the who we've been looking for. I think he's the other Sith Lord. And that blew Mace Windu away. But he has those moments for every time that he gives them a headache because he's throwing a tantrum in the Jedi Council about not being made a master on this situation. He's come through. Padmé says it. It's like they trust you with their lives on this case. She's made that, and she's not just saying that to be placating. She knows the Jedi and how much that he's meant to them. So at any rate, it's got to be a huge regret. His gut instinct when they first met Anakin back in the Phantom Menace was to tell him, "Thanks for the save, kid. But you're not getting trained in this situation." We could play out all kinds of what ifs if they had actually gone with that. But here they are. And there's got to be a major regret on his part that why, we have these rules for a reason. We don't take kids of, beyond babies because they've already formed attachments that are too hard to overcome. And not only did he have that attachment, he formed one at the time that we took him. He didn't get a chance to even get that training there. And here we are. So thank you for attending my TED Talk. So, okay. Now we get to Padmé's apartment. And Obi-Wan shows up following Yoda's advice. And she tells him that she saw Anakin there yesterday, but she doesn't know where he is now. She's lying. And Obi-Wan says Anakin is in grave danger. And she turns around and practically spits in his face from the Sith. And then Obi-Wan's response is from himself. Anakin has turned to the dark side, and she completely her face completely crumbles, falls with that news. And then he goes on to break. He's not gentle. He says, Obi-Wan says he has seen security hologram of Anakin killing younglings. Padmé doesn't believe him, but who can blame her? And then Obi-Wan goes on to try and soften a little bit. Anakin was deceived by a lie. They all were. The Chancellor is behind everything, including the war. Palpatine is a Sith Lord that they've been looking for. And Anakin has became Palpatine's new apprentice after the death of Count Dooku. And then Padme's response to that is, I don't believe you. But then she immediately says, I can't, which I think is probably the truth. I think there is a kernel in her that believed every word that Obi-Wan says, but she just can't. She can't afford for her own well-being to believe that. But anyway, Ross, what's your take on this scene?
It is the next person that has to deal with the reality and the facts of it and the denial. And there must be a way. This can't be actually happening. And it is. And a lot of people make decisions that impact others, and they may be doing it for the right reason in their mind, but that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. And that's what Anakin is doing every which way at this point, primarily because of how he lost his mother and not wanting to lose Padmé. And that's been weaponized against him.
Mm-hmm. Jay, what do you think?
I feel so bad for Obi-Wan in this scene because that has to be, I mean, it's one thing to have to face the reality yourself as he did at the Jedi Temple, but to have to tell Padmé this, knowing, because I mean, obviously he asks her, Anakin's the father, isn't he? I mean, he's known all along. Again, we've known this all the way back when even some of the jokes in the Clone Wars. But you can see that he is physically ill when, like, he puts his hand over his mouth, almost like he's going to get physically ill when he says the security hologram of him killing younglings. And when Padmé says, I can't, as you said, Dennis, I think that is the one kernel of hope that remains when she says there's still good in him. She can't believe it because she knows, she's seen Anakin at his worst. She's heard his confessions of him when he went on the rampage of the Tusken Raiders. She knows what kind of pain he has been through and the way that he has, I hate to say dealt with his pain, but the way that it's manifested. And so for her to say, I can't, I think a lot of that is because she still sees that kernel of hope, that part of him that, and plus he's the father of her children. So of course you're going to give that person the benefit of your doubt, even if you have all the facts in front of you. I mean, you're still going to want to have faith. You're still going to want to have hope. And that's what love is.
Yeah, think of like her last 48 hours. From her apartment, she watched the Jedi Temple starting to burn, and she was afraid about what happened to Anakin. Then the next morning, Anakin shows up and tells her, I'm fine, came to check on you and the baby. I'm about to go off on another mission because, the Jedi are trying to overthrow the Republic. And so she's got the bad news there already that, the Jedi, she's, of course, married to a Jedi, and he's fine, but she was close to so many Jedi. They sent her on missions. They conferred with her. In Attack of the Clones, Yoda tells her, heard about your incident at the landing platform, find out that you're okay, made my heart glad. I can't remember exactly how he puts it. But, the point is that, so, she's got to deal with that. And then she's watching the Republic crumble. And so it's just been bombshell after bombshell after bombshell. And now Obi-Wan shows up and says, oh yeah, you're, your secret husband, who I know nothing about, who is the father of your child, who I know nothing about, is fallen to the dark side, and he's killed children. And to your point, Jay, that rings so true. Like, the only other person that knows about that is the Chancellor. The Jedi don't know that he did that. Right. The only thing that ever happened with that is that Yoda sensed Anakin was in pain at that time, but I don't think they ever asked. We say, why not, Yoda? Yeah, I sense something, Anakin. You want to tell us something? Oh no, everything's fine. caught up with some old family, went to Geonosis. Yeah, great. But but at any rate, yeah. And then that closing line of, Obi-Wan's, which is like, Anakin is the father, isn't he? I'm so sorry on this. It's not just a conveyance of empathy in that situation. I think it is I am so sorry I didn't do something. And, and I'm thinking of like the Obi-Wan Kenobi series when he's talking to Leia about all the qualities that, she has from her parents and everything like that, and how much he admired Padme and stuff like that. And again, you see something, say something situation that we have in this movie. But we've only got a couple of smaller scenes left. Do either one of you have any other observations about this major one before we move on?
I think that sets up the final thing we see before the time cuts off, and the processing that Padme is going through. So I think this just continues throughout, even as we get these other pieces sprinkled in here. This never leaves her head as soon as Obi-Wan says that.
Yeah, and I want to backtrack just for a second too. When we're in the Senate and Palpatine has just said that we are restructuring into the first Galactic Empire. Again, referencing the novelization, Bale loses it. And he's like, this can't happen. We've got to stand up for this. And Padme is the first one to say, no, you can't do this. You have to play good little senator. You have to, if it comes to a vote, you have to vote for Palpatine. And Bale's like, no, why? What are you talking about? And we need you to lead us. And Padme straight up says, I may not live that long.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so now that we're getting all of like this whole scene too, you almost wonder if that's like really playing into her head, like all of these things that Anakin has told her about her dying in childbirth, and then everything that's come to pass, and then now she finds out what's happened to Anakin, and you just wonder where her mind is at this point. And it's like you said, Dennis, it's just these last 48 hours of her life has been just completely upended, and I can't even imagine.
All right. Well, from here we go back to Mustafar, and the dirty business has been taken care of, and Anakin is out on a platform watching the lava, and you can see the streaks from the tears that have run down his face in this moment. I mean, yeah, I think it's just kind of what we've been talking about this entire time. It's, this is his humanity is slipping from him here. He's been acting out of desperation. This is not the person he is. Padme is going to show up in a bit and tell him that you're a good person. Come with me, and this, that, and the other. But he's losing that here, and he tells her early in this movie that I don't think I'm the Jedi I should be in this situation, and it's kind of like and he tells her that he's lost, and that's all echoing back to him here in this moment. But what did you two think after rewatching this scene?
I mean, you're getting that liquid fire of the lava reflecting off of this hooded figure, just showing a piece of the face with those teardrops coming down, but with those eyes that are just so intense still. This is a tortured soul that understands, hey, I've sold my soul. I don't know what I can protect of any other part of my life now. And then obviously that arrives as once Padme shows up.
Yeah, and I think also, as you said earlier, Dennis, with when Anakin looks over his shoulder, he has the Sith eyes, in that moment. Here he does not. Here, as Rashi pointed out, it's all Anakin. But even though he did all those dastardly deeds to the Sand People in his revenge, this is the first time he's truly tapped into the dark side, because we don't know for sure that his chemistry changed from regular Anakin eyes to Sith eyes when he was with the Tusken Raiders, but I'm assuming it didn't. And so now that he's truly crossed that threshold into the dark side and he's touched that side, that's where I think that torment truly, with the tears and everything, like he's like, I've crossed a line. Like he
Mhm.
knows it. He felt it. Whatever good he thought he had in him, he doesn't believe anymore. And I think that that's where, when we get that in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and I'm getting chills right now, but like when he says that to Obi-Wan, he says, "You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did." This is the moment it happened when,
Mhm.
right before this, when he got those Sith eyes, and he's tormented now, but he knows it's done. I can't go back. As you mentioned that earlier, Ross. I can't go back.
Mhm.
So sad.
It
Ugh.
is. We picked such a fun segment to talk about.
Oh my gosh, I know,
Yeah.
but it's
10 minutes of joy.
Yeah.
that's why it just like it's in our core, it's in your soul when you watch this movie. It's just so gut-wrenching. I mean, I know when I went to see this again in the theater, I mean, I was crying all over again.
Mhm.
And when my husband, I've told the story, when it was like one of our very first date nights ever after the kids were old enough to like stay with babysitters and stuff. And this was the movie that I wanted to see so bad. And my husband said, from the time that Order 66 happened to the end of the movie, like my jaw never like closed. And he would look over at me, and and then the tears were flowing, and it's just all over every single time, all over again, every time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, yeah. Well, I want to finish up this and then like this conversation, and then I'll have some other observations before we close out the conversation completely. But back on Coruscant, Captain Tycho wants to go with Padme, and she denies him. She says this is something she has to do herself. 3PO will look after her. As much as I love 3PO and as much as I've defended him against all kinds of accusations over the years, bring some real help, Padme. Love him to pieces, good in the fight. He is not. But then we see Obi-Wan sneaking aboard. Back at the Senate building, Anakin reports to Palpatine the Separatists have been taken care of. And then Palpatine tells Anakin to send a message to all ships in the Trade Federation that all droid units must be shut down immediately. And he says that he'll do it. And then turns around to see Padme's ship arriving. And as she lands on the planet, she looks very nervous, very concerned, very upset, very contemplative. And she sees Anakin running towards her, and she gets up to exit the ship. And that's where we cut off for this segment here. So I just breezed through those three things. I mean, they're not unimportant scenes. They move the plot along. But as far as depth and thematic, they don't have as much to say, I think, as the other big scenes that we've discussed from this segment here. But any observations from that last 60 seconds of that segment that I just covered?
Yeah, I think Palpatine's line that it is finished then.
Uh-huh.
He killed the Separatist. The war is over because you just killed their leaders. Now it is the next stage. It is what, for him, it's just, oh, perfect. You've restored peace and justice to the galaxy because now I'm in charge completely.
Mm-hmm.
So that really is like putting that slice down the middle of the screen of this is before and this is after, and then just back to Padme. She's traumatized. She is processing everything and processing through a lens of fear and despair that you see washing over her. And 3PO is just completely unaware. Oh, I'm getting
Oblivious.
a hold of this space thing. And
Yeah.
it's just like, oh, but she didn't want someone who could understand emotion. So I think 3PO was the best person to bring because she had to process it herself. And 3PO would be the last person to understand what she's going through. So I think that was deliberate and very thoughtful on her part for what she was about to face.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the added benefit that 3PO already knows that she's married to Anakin. It's not bringing yet one more person into
Yeah.
that circle of knowledge.
That's
Jay?
a good point. Yeah, I mean, I think that 3PO, just saying, "Oh, 3PO will protect me." I mean, that was just obviously just a misdirect, because one, Padme can take care of herself, pregnant or not. She's proved that time and time again. She's very capable. But, to your point, yes, he knows about the two of them, and she doesn't want to involve another person. Like, why would she want to take, Tycho with her? Because she doesn't want him to know what is going on. Also, she wants to keep the circle as small as possible because she wants to deal with her husband herself and try to once again pull him back.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I said take someone with you, but that, I
Sure.
said that
No,
tongue
I
in
get
cheek
that.
because, well, the other thing is that who is she going to take that is going to protect her from Anakin in this situation? No, the answer is nobody. And there's no one that she can take with her that she would not be putting in danger in that situation. And she knows what Obi-Wan just told her. To your point, you don't want to involve someone else. If there's any hope of salvaging this, you can't have anybody else finding out that Anakin was involved in the slaughter of the Separatists. That and that raises more questions there. Oh, we have a Jedi that survived just after we found out they all turned on the Republic. So what's his story there as well? The other thing is this is just an observation is that Palpatine tells Anakin to send a message to all ships in the Trade Federation that all droid units must be shut down immediately. And one of the things that has come up over the years is that it wasn't the entirety of the Trade Federation that was supposed to be involved in with the Separatists here. The Trade Federation still maintained its seat in the Galactic Senate. They were offering their services to both sides of this war under the table here. But, I never paid attention until I saw this, until I heard that line today. It's like all ships in the Trade Federation. No, they were all in on it. I mean, they were lying. I mean, not all Naimodians are in the Trade Federation, but the Trade Federation was in on the conspiracy with Sidious in the situation. And so their protestations to the contrary with the Senate were just lies in that situation. So, but the thing is that the people at the top that knew that for the Trade Federation are now all dead, courtesy of Anakin. So Sidious has covered his tracks with that regard. Any final thoughts? We've spent a lot of time on this segment. Again, not the cheeriest 10 minutes of Star Wars, but here we are.
I think when I saw where it was picking up, I was just like, oh, I got like the richest piece of cheesecake on the plate. This was dense. This was packed with flavor. This was packed with getting punched in the face in beautiful ways. Like this is Star Wars. In 10 minutes. We get a little bit of everything the whole way through. Maybe the biggest thing missing here is hope, but it's there. But it is strangled and gasping for air if it's there. So I'm extra thankful that however you guys decided when I was going to get a chance to come on here, that it was for these 10 minutes and getting to share thoughts with the two of you and bounce ideas off of each other. So thank you guys so much.
You're truly the perfect person for this segment. So the Force was with us, that's for sure. So thank you so much for your insights.
Yeah, that said, next year when we do, we'll find something that's got some lighter-hearted moments to bring him back for. so it's not all deep emotion and gloom next year. But Jay, any other thoughts on the segment before we wrap up?
Just again, I feel so bad for Obi-Wan. I mean, when he's getting into that little compartment and then he force closes the door. I mean, you see that look on his face, like I'm betraying Padmé right now for the sake of going to kill her husband and confront him. And and I can't help to think too, the what ifs. Like, what if Obi-Wan hadn't gotten on her ship? Could she have could she have pulled him back? Could she have talked him back? So
yeah, that's another good one.
Too.
Yeah. Shivers.
So much.
Last scene with these big three coming up, and it's not like when the last scene of the big three we get from the original trilogy where it's all hugs and smiles. So we'll be covering that next time when we talk about Revenge of the Sith in October. Okay, well, Ross, again, thank you so much for joining us for this. It was a privilege, and I'm glad you could make it. And it had been way too long since we talked to you, so I'm really glad that you got to help us out with this tonight. why don't you remind everybody where they can find you, what you're up to, and what else you got going on?
Yeah, so I try to stay as involved as possible with Fantha tracks. The news hasn't been as hot and heavy, and any news I know they have covered, but any other media hasn't been as much. But it's been super fun to talk Andor season 2 with Dan Z for the 11th and 12th episodes of what he was doing, and then also the first episode on a rewatch with Rebel Base Card with Greg McLaughlin and Greg Cass. So it's been nice, and it's fun how this sometimes cycles through, even if a lull hits.
Mhm.
All of a sudden it's just like, oh, hey, I'm getting to catch up with all my friends again, and this is fantastic. Andor winning the 5 awards that it won was beautiful and well deserved, and just trying to get ready for the next round of Star Wars information and entertainment that's coming through.
All right. Well, again, thanks so much for hanging out with us, and we look forward to having you back. Hopefully, not so far in the future this time.
Sounds
sure.
good. Thank you both.
Thank you, Ross.
All right, that was Ross Hollebon. So make sure you go to Fantha Tracks and check out what he's doing. I think you can still find old episodes of the Album Cockpit podcast on both Spotify and YouTube, if I'm not mistaken, but one or the other. But he's always a great get for the show and always has a lot of great insight. So I'm glad he could join us this week.
Oh, absolutely. And now I want cheesecake.
That's not a bad idea. All right. Get a nice, like, dark orange colored version of some sort
Ooh,
if your Cheesecake Factory to
yeah.
go with lava from Mustafar. I think we're onto something here. Okay. Well, with that, thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and this entry in our Revenge of the Sith series. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you want to make sure that you get next month's episode, then go ahead and hit subscribe on your podcatcher of choice if you haven't done so already. And if you could help us out, we'd greatly appreciate it. Just rate, review the podcast on your podcatcher of choice, especially if that's Apple Podcasts. That makes the algorithm go and gets the show in front of more people. And then if you want to get the entire back catalog of shows over on Podcast Stardust, the best place to do that is retrozap.com. You have all previous 942 episodes there, as well as all the other great shows that are currently on the network, covering all kinds of great geeky topics. Jay, one more time, what are our social media contacts and where else can we be found on the internet?
All right. Well, thank you to everyone who continues to support us. And we are continuing to grow as well. And that's from all of those shout outs that y'all have been giving us on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. So please keep doing that. And you can also check us out on our other socials as well. So we have our Pinterest boards with lots and lots of ideas for everything Star Wars, and our YouTube and YouTube music outlets as well, where you can also subscribe to the show, and you can interact with us and leave us some reviews and some reactions as well. We'd love to hear what you thought of this segment of Revenge of the Sith or any other episodes that you've listened to. And we also have our TeePublic store that has 7 different show logo designs available. Everything from t-shirts and sweatshirts to coffee mugs, tote bags, even blankets, wall hangings, all kinds of fun stuff. So check that out on TeePublic, and the link to that is in our show notes.
All right. Upcoming on the show on Friday, we'll be getting into the latest Star Wars news. And then on Monday, we'll begin our discussion of Lego Rebuild the Galaxy Pieces of the Past. And I'm looking forward to that because the original Rebuild the Galaxy was just a fun what if type situation for Star Wars. So can't wait to see what they've done in Pieces of the Past. So make sure you stick around for that. With all that having been said, thanks for listening to episode 943 of Podcast Stars, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and until next time, may the Force be with you.